All right, well, welcome to Session 2. We're going to focus today on what is perhaps my favorite session, but I will probably say that the rest of the sessions as well. So we're going to focus on building caring relationships today. And certainly with Session 1 fresh in your memory bank, you know that that mission statement is very important. And so I hope by the time we're coming back and looking at Session 2 that you have already begun that process of committing that mission statement to memory. Because our mission is that. It's to build caring relationships with the hope of gaining permission to share the life-changing good news of Jesus Christ in a non-threatening manner. In today's session, what we are going to spend time unpacking and really focusing very specific attention on is that first three words, building caring relationships. How many of you have heard this phrase? It's a cliche phrase, but people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You know, that phrase becomes a cliche, and cliches become cliches because they're usually true. And that one certainly is. And so today we're going to focus on building those caring relationships. Now, think with me for just a minute at all of the ways that we build to communicate and relate with one another in our society today. You see, if we had a marker board behind us, and if you're watching this on video and in a small group, I'd encourage you to hit the pause button and list up some items right now, some different ways that we try to build connection and relationship. But if we were to work through them, we would say a number of ways. We try to connect face-to-face. We have mobile phones that we try to call on. If you've come into the era of iPhone, you even have something now called FaceTime, and you can FaceTime phone call someone. And we have Twitter, and we have Facebook, and we have every manner of ability to want to try to connect with each other. And something that I always think when I see all of those ways that we strive to connect with one another is that if relationships were not so important to us, we wouldn't create so many ways to try to connect. And if we looked in Scripture, and it's certainly a passage that we could look at, the need for relationship, we understand the first time God ever says something is not good, He says it's not good for the man to be alone. Now, if you're female, you probably think it's not good for any man to be alone because he can't make it alone. And that's probably true, and I would agree with that. And so you have to know that God knew what He was talking about when He said that. We know that God knows what He's talking about on everything. But we're going to focus today on that aspect of relationship and how we go about building caring relationships. In the question, page 18 in your care guide today, I want to encourage in your group to have some dialogue about how you have lived out the mission in your community since our last session. And would encourage you to dialogue about that and hear the great stories, because we talked about being a threefold cord, and what we want to do is encourage one another. And so we want to hear, because you may have a dry time this week, God not doing a whole lot or not doing anything through you or not putting situations out there, but somebody else has. And so you would be encouraged by how other people are living out their faith in their community since our last session. I'll share one that I hope will encourage you, because it really illustrates the importance of today's topic, that topic of building caring relationships. We heard a great report recently from one of our community chaplains who was actually in process. They were in the training, and they were about 4 weeks into the training class. So they had covered Session 1 on the introduction, and they had covered today's session on building caring relationships. And they had even moved to Session 3 on permission and confidentiality, and they had just covered Session 4, and God gave them a wonderful opportunity. We heard this report, and it illustrates building caring relationships. Because a lady in Tampa, Florida, happened to be in attendance at a volleyball game. Her daughter's volleyball game, high school volleyball. She gets into a conversation with someone that she had, guess what, been building a caring relationship with. Because she's been seeing this person at the volleyball games week in, week out, had gotten to know her by name, had gotten to know her daughter's name. And so they had two daughters playing on the same team, and they're building this relationship. And on one particular Thursday afternoon at the volleyball game, the other lady began to unpack some things that were going on in her life. And the lady in Tampa, Florida, who was 4 weeks into community chaplain training, did what we're going to talk about today. She listened. And she listened to the difficulties that this fellow mother was going through, walked with her in a listening mode through that process, and walked out of that gym that afternoon and continued the conversation. And before they drove home, she had been able to share the life-changing good news of Jesus Christ and see a lady at a volleyball game to come to faith in Christ. And you know, that's what it's all about. How many times are you like me and you've been in a church service and you hear the pastor challenge and preach and teach and say, hey, we need to get out of the stands and get into the game. And you know something? This lady in the volleyball game, she was in the stands and she was in the game at the same time, because she was building that caring relationship, and she did it with a hope, and the hope was manifested. She gained that permission, and she was able to share the good news of Jesus Christ. And so we cement that mission, that concept in our brains, and then look for those opportunities at volleyball games. We look for them in the line at Starbucks, and we look at how we build that caring relationship. Now, remember what we said in session 1, that non-threatening manner. That means what? The person doesn't run from us, right? You know, I met my wife more than 25 years ago now. And we were 18 years old at the time. And I hope everybody's saying you can't be 20, you know, it can't be 25 years and those, you know, those kind of things. And you know, I was shopping for clothes last night, and the lady wasn't sure how old I was, and that kind of made me glad too. So we met my wife 25 years ago. And when I met her, I'm not exactly sure she perceived me as non-threatening, all right? Because we were both 18 years old. We were in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And many of you sitting there and you're doing the concepts in your brain. 18 years old in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina can't mean a whole lot of good was going on. And I would agree with you in that. And, you know, I thank God for the Myrtle Beach Police Department for multiple reasons. I'm thankful that they pulled us over that night, that for having 9 people in a 2-seat hatchback car. I am grateful that they didn't give our driver a ticket for multiple things that he could have been ticketed for. And I'm grateful that the Myrtle Beach Police Department asked us to walk down the boulevard, or else we would get said ticket. Because as we walked down that night, a guy I was with saw an old girlfriend in the arcade there playing these baseball machines. You know, the kind that they have at the Grand Strand there. And so I'm wandering in there with him, and I spot a very attractive young lady that would eventually someday become my wife. And I walked up to said baseball machine, and apparently it was not in a non-threatening manner, because she proceeded to change baseball machines and run from me. And I am, if not anything else, I am persistent. And so I pursued and I chased her to the next baseball machine and began the process of trying to build what I thought was a caring relationship. And she was having nothing of it. She changed machines again. But I told you that I was persistent. All right? And so I pursued again and built what has wound up being a 25-year caring relationship. Glad to tell you that. But we want to talk about that. We want to talk about how do we build that caring relationship. You see, today's bridge, page 19 in your books and in your session, your care guide, is we're going to focus on how building caring relationships, it unlocks the door to speak truth into the lives of people in your community. Because you see, people really don't care how much you know that truth until they know how much you care. And in that process of them knowing, there's something that really will happen. A door will unlock. They will begin to open up doors to you of their lives. They'll open up doors. You see, if we walk into someone's house and we see the foyer, what do we see? Just the entranceway, right? And it may be nice and clean and kept and swept and vacuumed and pot and those. But if we walk to the room off the foyer, that might be the catch-all room, right? And we open that door, we might see where everything got stored right before we showed up. And it's the same in relationships. When we build a caring relationship, what we're doing is we're building that relationship so that permission's gained and that key is unlocked and that door gets opened to other areas of their lives. They trust us more because they know we care, and they're willing to open up more and more of their lives to us. And so we're wanting to build those relationships because they do unlock the door to allow us to speak truth into the lives of the people that we serve. How many of you have ever, like me, you've locked your keys either in the house, in a car, or something like that? Yes? You know, I can't be the only doofus in the room that has done that, and I have. 20 years ago, living in an apartment in where I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina, we had to go out and start the cars in the winter months. And I remember one particular time my wife had already gone to work, and she worked 15 miles away from our home, and I had went out and started my car, and I jumped out of the car and instinctively locked the door and shut it with the engine running and said, "Oh no," and I was locked out. Had to call a locksmith, wait 15 minutes to get said lock open, pay $35. Nice to know you, have fun, get on about your life. And you know what? That particular day, it slowed me down. I had to have someone else's help to invest time in getting me in my car. And what I want to challenge you to think about is that when we build caring relationships, it takes time. It takes an investment. It takes us willing to get outside of ourselves and our self-interest and the busyness of our day. See, I was really busy. I was late for work. And I had to get to work, but I was at the mercy of somebody else that could come and unlock the door. And so I would challenge you to think about slowing down just enough to build that caring relationship and pour yourself into them and watch God unlock the door to be able to speak truth into their lives. Now, page 19, I want you to think with me for just a minute at how you would perceive different people. Let's pretend, let's imagine that we walk into the food court at the local mall. And as soon as we walk in the door, we have someone shoving a piece of teriyaki chicken up in front of us. Now, how many of you think that person with that teriyaki chicken on the other end of that toothpick really, really cares about you as a person? Now, they really don't know. They care about you pulling your wallet out and buying some teriyaki chicken that day, right? How many of you are like me and you've shown up on a car lot and you've watched, as soon as you walk up, the number of sales reps that climb up out of their seat and they come running? You see, I used to sell automobile advertising, and we would say in the automobile advertising business, we're going to drive your ups. And what drive your ups meant was we were going to have the advertising that would cause your sales reps to get up because everybody was going to be flocking to your car lot. And how many of you, when all those sales reps come running out, you think that they care about you as a person? No, they care about you doing what? Buying an automobile. And so there's all kind of different ways. I had one even this past week, the college kid who showed up wanting to sell me magazines right in the middle of the North Carolina Tar Heel Duke Blue Devil basketball game. And he had a difficult time grabbing my attention in spite of the fact that my team was down by 15 at that point. And so you see where the allegiance lies there, and he really, what he cared about most was buying magazine subscriptions. At that moment in time, what I cared about most was my team coming from 15 down and wanting to see it happen and praying that it would happen, but I'm not so sure it did that day. But we look at how people perceive us, and what I would challenge you is we all know instinctively the person with the teriyaki chicken, the sales rep or the magazine sales rep, none of them really care about us as a person. They care about something that they care about. They want us to care about it. They want to move money from our pocket to theirs. But here's what I want you to reflect on. Offline of this session, as we begin to talk about building caring relationships, is I want you to reflect on how people perceive you. When you begin to reach out and you begin to manifest your faith and share about your faith or try to serve or minister, how do people perceive you? Do they perceive you? Would they begin to describe you as this radically strong Jesus freak? Would they describe you as some kind of crazy? Or would they describe you as a person that really cares? And what we want to really focus on is being that caring person, building that caring relationship where people would see and perceive us as people who most importantly care about them and secondarily care about the things of Christ and care about Christ's work in their lives. And we want to join those two things together. I'll share with you this. How many of you have been introduced before? You've had somebody introduce you in a public setting or just in a party and say, hey, this is my brother John, this is my sister, and introduce you. And we've all been introduced in small settings, maybe sometimes in large settings. I had someone introduce me one time, and this was my all-time favorite introduction. I had been serving a company for a number of years, about 3 years, this particular company, and had built a relationship with this one particular supervisor in this company. And she was not a follower of Christ, but she was very interested in things about Christ. And so we would have numerous conversations about how to have a relationship with God and the teachings of Jesus, and we would actually study some of the passages of Scripture together. And she was a supervisor, and she would often hire new employees. And so one day she had hired a new employee, and I was the chaplain, and I was walking around, and I come up on this new employee, and she's doing some training, some in-service training, and introducing this new employee, and she introduces me to this new employee, and she says, "This is Dwayne. He's our corporate chaplain, and he's all about Jesus, and he's not at all about Jesus." That was the introduction. And it kind of took me aback and caught me off guard, and so I just introduced myself and gave a business card to the young lady. And so fast forward about 20 minutes, I circled back around and I said, "Hey, back to that introduction. What was that all about?" Because it was a little bit of a different introduction. I said, "You said I was all about Jesus, but not at all about Jesus." I said, "What were you talking about?" And she said, "Well, here's what I meant." She said, you don't have to talk to you very long to know that you just want to talk about Jesus. That you're just all about Christ's work and that kind of thing. But you're just never up in anybody's face about it. And you know what? What I said then was, and what I said to myself was, thank you, Lord, for that kind of reaction. Because you know what she was really saying? She was really saying, I feel safe. I feel okay. And sometimes we can think our perception is one thing, and it be something far different. And that was a nice thing to hear her say. Because if I had to take you back to the fella 20 years ago that we talked about in session 1, I'm going to tell you that that's not how he would have described me. He would have described me as all about Jesus and abrasive about it. All right? And so what we want to do is we want to walk a line of building this caring relationship and be thinking about how people perceive you and recognize that we all have blind spots. It's like driving down the road and that one place in your mirror that you can't see somebody passing you. We have blind spots. I would encourage you in your group or with people that you trust, people that you know, ask that question, how do people perceive me? Do they perceive me as a caring person? Am I being effective at building that caring relationship? And so be focused on that. Page 20, 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 19 through 22. We won't read that entire passage, but I would encourage you to reflect on it. I would encourage you to read it in a number of different translations because it gives us a great picture. But it is the passage where Paul basically outlines for us that he is all about becoming what? All things to all people, that he might by all means, keywords here, save some. Now don't let that passage get too far out of context. Paul understood clearly who did the saving work. He understood from start to finish that the saving work was the work of God, but Paul was willing to be very strategic in how he built relationships. He would build relationships with Jewish people, which was his background. He would build relationships with Gentile people, simply meaning those people that were not Jewish followers. They were looking at things from a different perspective, and Paul was willing to build relationships with people on their terms so that he might by all possible means relate and some might be saved. And so we're talking about building caring relationships. Now, the balance of our time in this second session, we want to begin outlining a ministry formula that we can tuck into our minds and really run as the framework for what we're going to do and how the rest of the training will proceed. We're going to talk about building caring relationships and building bridges through relationships using a very simple ministry formula that you find on page 21. That ministry formula is time plus talk plus transparency plus trials equals trust. Let's explain that and walk through it one piece at a time so that we grasp what we're talking about and how we're going about building caring relationships. Now, before we get into the formula, let me say one additional thing. Some of us find building relationships a very natural thing. It comes very naturally to want to connect with people. Other people that may be even in this group, or you may be watching by video and participating in another group, you would label yourself an introvert. And you would say building relationships is the most difficult thing in the world for me. And I would challenge you, it does not matter if you would label yourself extrovert or introvert, God can use you. In fact, I would encourage you that if you would raise your hand and say, I am by nature, God wired me and designed me to be an introvert, that God may want to wire you and use you as an introvert because He wants you to have a bandwidth of a select number of people to go very deep with that select number of people. Versus someone else who might be an extrovert who is very capable of engaging and connecting with hundreds of people, but not really capable of going very deep with very many. And so God can use us all. No matter how He's wired or natured us, He can work. And this ministry formula is something that will apply no matter how you would classify yourself, be it extrovert or introvert. So let's take a look. Page 21, the T is for time. The T is for time, and what we want to do is we want to invest time through a very consistent point of contact. In the corporate chaplain's realm, we call this making rounds, and what we do is we make rounds and visit the companies, and we try to have a very brief 30-second to 3-minute interaction with every employee. We're investing time to get to know people. What I would challenge you is to put that principle into play in your own context and invest time getting to know people in your neighborhood. Maybe it's staying at this pool in the summer, or maybe it's hanging out at an HOA meeting, or maybe it is out walking your dog. Anybody ever notice how pets draw people together? So you're out walking and you invest time talking with people. Invest time when you're going through that fast food restaurant, that place that you frequent week in and week out, getting to know the people on a first name basis. Invest time talking with them and getting to know them so that you are building a foundation of trust. The reason we invest time is we want to get to know people and we want to allow people to get to know us. And so it's the consistent investment of time. Remember the Matthew 9 passage? Matthew did that. He invested time in those that he knew the best, his co-workers. We put that verse again on page 21. It says, that night Matthew invited Jesus to be his dinner guest along with his fellow tax collectors and many other, there's that phrase again, notorious sinners.